Welcome in, everyone, to Let's Talk Utes. Today we are previewing the Big 12, Utah's first season in the Big 12 after moving from the Pac 12. And let's get right into it. First up is Arizona. Arizona last year was obviously really good. 9-3 in the regular season. They uncovered a hidden gem in Noah Fafita, and they bring back Tedero McMillan, who could be the best receiver in the country. Just a preface here, a lot of the win totals that we're using, a lot of the previous records from previous seasons are regular season only because win total is regular season only. So we're using regular season record from last year. We'll also have some graphics from Pick Six previews, which just help to explain some relevant stats, such as, scoring defense, scoring offense, and anything else you can think of, really. So, Landon, why did you go over 7.5 for Arizona?
Yeah, I went over because as you can see, they had 9 regular season wins last year in maybe the best version of the Pac 12 ever. And I just think they're returning the two most key components of their team with Noah Fafita and Tedero McMillan. I also think that the new coach they picked up was a good hire. He was pretty successful at San Jose State, and I think that he'll be able to continue at least the offensive success for Arizona. Something that stands out for me is that Noah Fafita didn't even come in until the fourth game, and even that was enough to take their passing offense up to eighth overall at 308 yards per game. So
Impressive.
just it looking down their schedule, I don't see more than 4 losses because all they have to get is 8 wins to hit, and so that means that 4 losses they'll be at 8 wins. I just don't see more than 4 losses, so I went over.
I very similar. I think Arizona bringing back Tedero McMillan is the key component here, and also only losing Jonah Coleman for the offensive starter when Fish went to Seattle. So it really made it. The offense is going to come back at a whole, and this offense was electric as we discussed with the 308 passing yards per game. And obviously, Noah Fafita is a stud. I don't see more than 3 losses truly, and so having it be 7.5 is great for me. And the win total, I have them over easily.
Yeah, I'm also over. I think that 7.5 is quite undervalued for Arizona. I think that with the way this schedule sets up, they could blow that out of the water, really. How I look at this a lot is how many guaranteed wins do they have? I'm willing to give them New Mexico, Northern Arizona, Houston, and ASU. Just off the bat, they're not losing those games. And if you have 4 wins in the pocket, I think you can pick up another 4 with how talented
Yeah.
they are. I really think that that's not going to be too much trouble. And this is one of the overs I think I feel the strongest about is 7.5 for Arizona. I
They
really
do have-
like, yeah.
Continue. Sorry.
I really like how their defense rounded into form last year. I think that the offense under Fish has been pretty good for a couple years. But last year the defense rounded into form. Hopefully Brent Brennan taking over can, keep that going.
I think they do have one of the tougher away schedules in the Big 12 with Kansas State, Utah, BYU, UCF, and TCU. I think 4 of those teams are top 5 Big 12 teams in the country in this conference, and so that's going to be a tough situation. But I do think they get at least one of those, which sets them up to get that 8-win total. So I'm pretty confident in that over.
One thing I find interesting is that when a team loses its head coach, especially in this era, you'd expect their returning production to be absolutely just ravaged by losing players to the portal. If you look at Arizona, that just is not the case. 66% returning on the defense and 71% returning on the offense. That's good enough to rank 43rd and 35th in the country, respectively. That is not bad at all for losing a head coach, and I do not think most teams would be able to retain that much talent if they didn't truly believe that they had a chance to be good.
And they only lost 3 starters and 8 total players in the portal once Fish left, which I think is pretty remarkable given the circumstances.
Especially going to Washington and the Big Ten, two very respected and prestigious conferences and programs.
Yeah. I think that this is the perfect springboard for Brent Brennan to, kind of kickstart his Arizona campaign. And I think they're going to be really good this year. I think they're a contender for the Big 12, so it's an easy over for me.
Agreed. I think when you're pairing a team that has a really explosive passing offense with a good defense, I just think that, and especially in a conference with a little bit of a step down in competition from what they played last year, they would have to be significantly worse. And there's really no sign that they'll be that much worse. I mean, unless something goes disastrously wrong with the coaching change.
Yeah, that is the big risk here for me. I think that that is
Hmm.
the number one risk factor. Okay, let's move on to Arizona State. Arizona State is in year 2 of a rebuild under Kenny Dillingham, former Oregon offensive
Hmm.
coordinator. Last year they went 3-9, not a great season for the Sun Devils, and I think it's still an uphill slog for rebuilding. Landon, why did you go over on the 4.5 win total?
I don't know. I'm not honestly sure why, other than I believe in Kenny Dillingham. I think he's a good coach, and I think that they'll at least be better than last year. I really don't see a path for them being worse, considering they were already pretty bad. I just think a mix of a little bit easier schedule plus another year for Kenny Dillingham to get his guys, another year to kind of establish his coaching method. I just think that they have a chance to be a little bit better than people expect.
The reason I took the under here is they have a pretty rough middle of the road in the schedule this year. Um, I mean, to start the Big 12, Texas Tech, Kansas, Utah, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, UCF, Kansas State. Like, that's just outside of maybe 2 of those games, I'm pretty confident in a loss. And then obviously having Mississippi State there in a non-conference game, that's just going to be tough. Especially, I mean, they have them at home, which does add some interesting dynamics there. Arizona State's always pretty tough at home, but this is just not a good team this year. Their defense, if they're returning 65% of their starters or their players, I guess, but this is not a good defense this year. I don't think it's going to improve much. And then the offense is quite bad. I could see them in a world getting to 4 wins. But with the win total being at 4.5, it's just not in the cards for me.
I'm also on the under. I think like Landon, I think Arizona State couldn't really be worse than last year. I think that they will be better. And I think that, health along the offensive line, getting a settled starter from day one in Sam Levitt, who I think is actually pretty good. And I do believe in Dillingham as a coach. I think he's a brilliant offensive mind. And but it's like Ethan said, it's the schedule. To me, I look at the schedule and I don't see any guaranteed wins. I think that every single game for Arizona State this year could be lost. And especially at year 2 of a rebuilding project, I look at that and I just can't confidently project that they're going to win 5 games. I think if they won 5 games, that would be an excellent, excellent season for Arizona State. I do think there's talent on there, but I think give Dillingham one more year, and then next year I think is the year you can start seriously talking about, bowl eligibility.
Yeah, I mean, why I think there's potential to have a little bit better of a season than that was even though they only had 3 wins last year, they did beat UCLA and Washington State, which were decent teams, and they actually almost took down Oklahoma State in an upset. And I actually rewatched that game recently, and it stuck with me that Oklahoma State had 9 wins in the Big 12. Arizona State, they were trailing Arizona State late in the third quarter. And to me, that just signifies that with a coaching advantage against most of these teams, I think Dillingham's one of the better coaches in the conference. I think they could pull out some games and surprise people.
I think that the beginning of the schedule is critical. I think if they really want to hit the over, they got to start 2-1. I think they
Agreed.
have to beat 2 out of 3 of Wyoming, Mississippi State, or Texas State. Because, like Ethan said, I think it gets rough through the middle. I think that that is tough. Really after week 3, there's only 2 games that I feel like they, have probably better than like a 35% chance to win, which would be Cincinnati and BYU.
Yeah,
And
I could
I
see that. I think I don't know. I just think with how good of a coach Dillingham is and how close he was able to play Oklahoma State, I think they pull off another upset outside of that. And so that plus starting 2-1 would get the job done for them with 5 wins.
This is a team that I think would be really fun to watch, though. I mean, I think they could be pretty electric regarding just trying their darndest to score as many points as freaking possible.
Oh, I mean, anytime I can watch Cam Scatabo, I'm into that.
Yeah, I mean,
Love
he's
that.
coming
Exactly.
back. So
Yeah, love that dude.
I mean, the dude literally threw a 40-yard touchdown pass and punted the ball as a running back. He's a freak. I love
Yeah.
it.
oh,
I will watch some of those games just
Same.
for him.
Okay, let's move on to Baylor. So Baylor's win total is 5.5 this year. In 2023, they were 3-9, which was obviously not exactly what they were expecting to begin the year. Dave Aranda maybe has the hottest seat in the conference, I would say. He's literally coaching for his job this year. And yeah, Landon, why did you go over the 5.5?
I went over the 5.5. I do think Dave Aranda is a better than average coach in the Big 12. And I also think their schedule is reasonably workable because you can have 6 losses on here. Just going down, like, say, lost to Utah 1, either BYU or Colorado, probably 2, probably Iowa State or Texas Tech, like 3, Oklahoma State 4, and then TCU or West Virginia 5, and then Houston or Kansas, like 6 there. So they would still be able to hit the over even if that happened. I also think that Baylor made good use of the portal, getting some decent players as well as returning a lot of production. I don't think they're going to be anything special, and this is one that I feel the least confident on. I could 100% see them repeating with like a 3-9 or 4-9 season. But I don't know. This one was more just of a feeling pick. I think they'll overachieve a little bit. They're a better program than 3-9.
It's funny because I think like a win total of 5.5 is a little bit or too high for Baylor. I mean, yes, the returning production is good, but if your returning production is terrible, it doesn't matter, in my opinion. I mean, there's room for improvement. I mean, a 3-9 Baylor team, they were really bad last year. Their defense was atrocious, which is something that is kind of a common denominator for a lot of these bottom half Big 12 teams. It's very interesting. I mean, returning 76 and 82% on offense and defense is nice, but returning 82% of that defense is really, really rough.
That's a lot of red on that graph, bro.
Yeah,
I don't. To start again, they have a really, really rough beginning to the Big 12. I mean, at Utah is going to be a game that's damn near impossible to win there. And then starting Colorado, going all the way down to the TCU game, I don't see a win there, a guaranteed win there. And I don't keep playing at Houston. I mean, Houston's probably one of the weaker teams in the Big 12 as well. Like, we'll talk about them soon, but at Houston, that's a tough place to play. I just don't see a world where they get more than 3 wins again. And having a 5.5 is just a little too high to the point where I gotta go under.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Something that I say a lot is I think returning production is probably the most overrated stat that people use because why would you want people to return if they were bad? And that's kind of how I feel about the Baylor defense, where they were so bad that returning 82% of your production, are you sure that that's a positive for you? Like, I feel like, there's a world in which they leave and you get better, simply addition by subtraction. But yeah, I'm with Ethan on the under. I think that there are really 2 ways that this season could go. Dave Aranda, coaches his ass off, saves his job, the team rallies around him, and maybe they make a bowl game or win 5 games and he's safe. And I also see the other path where, like the pressure gets to them. They kind of sputter off to a slow start. Maybe they drop it to Air Force and Colorado and start 1-3, because I'll give them Tarleton State. I think they're going to win that game. And Dave Aranda's fired. And I think that, we see this every year. Coaches are fired midseason and their teams fall apart. And so for me, when looking at those 2 paths, I just think the second is more likely. I just think that falling apart is probably more likely than, coming together and saving the season. So I went under. I agree with Landon that, this isn't a 3-win quality program, but external factors permitting, I do see them going under that
Yeah,
5.5.
I could see that happening as well, but just looking at their 5-year win trend was enough to make me question at least. Like in 2021, they had 12 wins. They were 12-2. And then in
Yeah, and they won the Big
2019,
12
yes,
championship.
they were 11-3 in 2019. Like I feel like a program that's capable of that, like expecting less than 6 wins is pretty low, even though on paper it makes sense with, I mean, basically who they're returning and how they've performed. I just feel like if they can recapture some of whatever they had in 2021 and 2019, the ceiling is just much higher on this program than some other Big 12 teams.
Yeah, they definitely have more talent, I would say, in general.
I will say, like, they did add some good pieces, like Landon said, in the transfer portal. I really do like Trevor Maia from Oregon, his last cycle. I mean, anybody from Oregon, you're going to add a lot of size to the defensive line, which Baylor desperately needed. So I do think, like, talking about the returning talent is a little bit of a rough thing because a lot of that returning talent won't see the playing field if these key additions for the transfer portal do pan out. The question is, can they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I think that's the big if.
I do think they get a bit of a break with the schedule too, because I don't think the schedule is that tough. I think they have quite, like, Oklahoma State and TCU, getting them at home is good. Going on the road to Houston, I don't think it's that bad, to be honest. And at Colorado, I don't think it's that bad either. So, like, I do think that the schedule is not a death blow.
Yeah,
This is definitely not the harder one. It's not one of the harder schedules in the Big 12. That's for sure.
And I mean, there has been actually some changes since then. The offensive coordinator has been fired and a new one's been hired. They've also added 6 new assistants, and they had the most freshmen take snaps of any team in the Big 12. And the year 2 boost for freshmen is actually real. Like, I understand, in general, like, say your defense was super bad, returning a ton of production isn't good. The only way that can be spun as, like, potentially good to me is if they were all freshmen, which in this case, a lot were freshmen.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my shakiest unders, and I'm not certain about this one. It's not one I would bet myself personally. It's definitely shaky for me.
Baylor's a weird team.
They are.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next team alphabetically, BYU. Their win total is 4.5. Last year they went 5-7 in their first year in Big 12 play, which I think was actually a decent season for their talent level. I think that the quarterback is going to be an issue this year. Losing Slovis and, obviously not getting great play from Slovis last year and not really having anyone proven to replace him is tough. So, Landon, why did you go under?
I went under just because the quarterback room is going to be such a liability. Quarterback's the most important position, and when you're choosing between some of the worst statistically and QBR rated quarterbacks in the entire country for your room, your ceiling is capped pretty hard by that, in my opinion. They've also recruited at the lowest or one of the lowest levels of all Power 5 teams. So pairing that with a team that honestly overachieved and went 5-7, they're going to be getting even worse next year, and they don't have a super favorable schedule. Like SMU and Wyoming are not pushovers out of conference, and those are both away games. I could easily see this team getting 4 wins, which is all that's required to hit the under.
For me, I truly only see one guaranteed win on their schedule. If that's the case, it's hard for me to even consider adding 4 more wins to that. They maybe have 1, maybe 2 50-50 games on their schedule outside of Southern Idaho University. I think SIU is. I'm not even 100% positive.
Southern Illinois, I believe.
Southern Illinois. See, don't even know. But it's at the bottom half of their schedule where, if history repeats itself, that's where BYU's definitely at their worst. And Arizona State and Houston, those are 2 of the games that you can maybe convince me they're 50-50. And so for me, like, I truly don't see a world where they can get up over 5 wins. again. And so I have the under.
Yeah, I think for me, the talent is the big issue there. I just don't think it's a good roster, really, heading into the Big 12. You know, Power 5 transitions, they take time, and they especially take a long time if you don't recruit well and you don't use the portal well, which BYU hasn't done well at either of them, to be honest. Yeah, the only game that I see as a gimme is Southern Illinois. I think that every other game is either it ranges, from 50-50 to unlikely to win. I think that the offense probably doesn't get any better, and I don't really see how the defense gets much better either. I think 5-7 was, actually kind of a high point for them last year. And
Agreed.
so I think, 4.5, I think it's respect to, Kalani Sataki and the coaching staff, taking some underranked, under-recruited players and, pushing them further. But I just don't see that. I just don't see it with this BYU team. I think that they're probably, the worst or one of the bottom 3 in the Big 12. And so I'm going way under on this one.
Yeah, something interesting that I see in Pick Six Preview, which is a metric that I actually like. They placed 68th out of 70th Power 5 teams in the run the ball, stop the run metric, which is a great indicator of just how physical your team is in the trenches. And so, being one of the smallest and weakest teams in the trenches, plus really not having a quarterback that can negate that by, like, say, speed on the outside or like a aggressive passing attack, it's just hard to win games that way.
Yeah, can the offense score enough to keep up with the other Big 12 offenses? Because I don't really see any path to the defense being good. So it's putting a lot on, projected starter Gary Bohannon, or maybe, Jake Retzlaff gets another look after last year. But yeah, it's a dark time right now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead a little bit to a team like Colorado, I'm sure they don't rank well in the run the ball, stop the run metric, but they always have a puncher's chance because they have a legit great quarterback and great wide receivers. So they always have a puncher's chance to score with the best of them.
Yeah.
They're also playing in a conference that's a little bit less of an offensive powerhouse, according to like a Pac-12. I'm getting ahead of myself though.
Okay, let's move on to the next team in the list, Cincinnati. Cincinnati also a new, Power 5 addition from the G5. 3-9 last year, win total set at 5.5 this year. I think that, the Power 5 transition is very difficult. And so I don't begrudge a lot of these teams, having a poor or losing record in their first year. I think that it's pretty freaking impressive if you can maintain a winning record in your first year in a Power 5 league. So Landon, why did you go over on Cincinnati?
I went over because I think their schedule is relatively manageable. Like, I honestly don't think it's the worst. Michigan or Miami, Ohio is actually decent. But I just like that they have a little bit of a chance to reset their defense, 51% returning production. So that might be a scenario where I feel like you could bring some new blood in to get that better. Then their offense was actually decent. So that's something I could see them improving a little bit this year.
You probably see a big trend with me. The teams that were bad last year in the Big 12, for me, they're going to be bad again this year. Especially those new G5 teams. If history repeats itself, the second year for a G5 going to a Power 5 program, or I guess a Power 4 in this circumstance now, at least to my understanding, is one of the worst years you have. A lot of your best players, especially in this modern day college football, are going to leave the transfer portal because they can go to places that are going to win. And then also, it's just hard. It's just a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of time and a lot of luck to make it happen, and a lot of skill. I just do not think Cincinnati is quite there yet. Their defensive overall, if we look at the opponents adjusted per play, that is ranked. That is all 70 Power 4 teams. They're 70th. Again, I like what Landon said about the returning production. This is another one of those cases like we talked about. Having a restart there could be very, very beneficial. I'm just not sure if they were as bad last year, if a reset will even help them. they give up 403 yards per game. That is ridiculously bad. I hope that can change. I do think Cincinnati is probably one of my harder ones to pick. I guess for me, I mean, they get a lot of their tougher games at home, so that can skew some win totals, and they can get to those 5 wins, get to that I guess the 6 win total. Being bowl eligible is just not in the cards for me for Cincinnati this year. That's why I have them on the under.
This is one that I actually think that there's a little more potential here than people are saying. I think last year was really like a confluence of really bad things. You know, Luke Fickell obviously leaves to go take the Wisconsin job because I think he saw that roster and said, oh no, all my seniors graduate this year. You know, like I'm not going to, you know, right now strike while the iron's hot, get a coaching upgrade, you know, move on. It's the right time. They also, so they lost all their roster. They lost a coach, and they went from a G5 conference to a P5 conference. So I don't think it's super surprising that, you know, the new guy couldn't put it together right away, that 3 wins was all they managed. But I just look at this schedule, and through the first 5 games, I think they have a legitimate shot to be 5-0. I don't think it's likely, but I think that they'll be in every one of those games. Like, I wouldn't say that they couldn't win any of those. And I also think that, you know, transfer additions, addressing the weaknesses of the roster, and getting a new defensive coordinator that plays from Iowa State that plays more of a Big 12 style can probably uptick them a little more than people are thinking. Because I don't think the cupboard is totally bare here. I think that the schedule sets up well where they only play, you know, 2 of the top teams really, as far as Kansas State and UCF for me. They miss Oklahoma State and Utah, which I think is a fortunate draw. And so for me, I feel decent about the over. I think that they could improve.
I will say 3-9 is pretty impressive considering how much turmoil and like hardship they had to go through with the trifecta of losing your head coach, a roster like all your seniors leaving, and then obviously the conference upgrade that you brought up, Tanner. 3-9 is quite impressive, if I'll be honest.
Another bright spot that we haven't mentioned yet is their rushing offense was actually really good, and the O-line run push was very impressive. They returned their entire offensive line for this next year, so that's something that will really help the run game.
Yeah, I think the pieces are there. And so I'm going to go over on that. Okay, let's move on to the next team, Colorado. Colorado, obviously, like Utah, is a Big 12 newcomer this year, but it's more of a homecoming for them than kind of a move because they were in the Big 12 previously. So they're a little bit more familiar with it than some of the other programs. Their win total this year is 5.5. Last year, they went 4-8. I believe that they started 3-0 last year before kind of falling completely off the map in conference play. I think Dion is obviously a polarizing figure. And so I'll let you talk about it, Landon. Why are you going over on the Bucs?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Dion's been coaching for like 3 years already, but we forget that it's only been 1 year. That was his first year. In Colorado, it was atrocious. They had 1 win the year before Dion got there, which is just unbelievable. I think that a team like Colorado, you need time to fill in the depth, and that's not going to happen for 1 year. I will say the one thing I don't doubt is that at least starters, they have the talent to compete with anyone in the Big 12. I think Shadur is a top 5 quarterback in the country. I think he has a lot of upside. And I think Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, some other guys they have on the team are amazing as well. And then pair that with a pretty reasonable schedule. I just see them to be improved across the board. And many Big 12 teams I think are going to struggle to stop the exact play style Colorado has. Like, let's not forget when they scored 45 on TCU. Like, TCU has a decent defense for the Big 12, and Colorado just completely diced it up. So I think that Colorado is over 5.5 pretty easily. I could even see them being one of the higher finishing teams in the Big 12.
The reason I have them as an over is I do think they have a pretty favorable schedule. They do have TCU, Utah, and Arizona, but getting Arizona at home and getting TCU right after a bye would definitely benefit them. I do think Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter are the real deal, and I do think, like Landon's point with Dion, giving him another year with this roster can definitely help. Another pretty interesting thing, looking at their schedule last year and the losses, 5 out of those 8 losses they had last year came with they were either down, they only lost by a touchdown or a field goal. They were in a lot of those games against some pretty good teams. Obviously, the other 3 losses they were blowouts. The 6-42 game against Oregon, they were never in that game. They never would have been in that game. But they ain't playing Oregon this year. Their best game is the best opponent they're playing is probably Utah or Kansas State. As much as we love those teams, they're not Oregon. I think they have a way better shot in every single one of these games. And when I see a 5.5 win total, I think, can this team be bowl eligible? I truly believe Colorado can be.
The reasons for optimism for me going over are, number one, Shadur Sanders. I agree with Landon. I think he's one of the 5 best quarterbacks in college football. I think that he is quite a polarizing player, just like his father, because of, his actions off the field. But I think the talent is real. The games you watch, he actually plays like he's a baller. Like, he's actually super good. It's just the off-field distractions that have turned people against him, I think. And the second reason for optimism was their 2-year transfer rank was second. I believe that they were only behind Ole Miss in transfers. And, while, all the critics say, oh, you can't build a team through the transfer portal, the culture's terrible. And while I do think there's some merit to that, talent wins. Talent is more important than anything, in my opinion. And I think that Colorado has upgraded. I think they're better than they were last year. I think the offensive line is still a question, but I think that they've upgraded pretty much everywhere else across the board. The reason for pessimism is the schedule. I think that this is probably the hardest schedule in the Big 12. Playing Kansas State, Arizona, Utah, Kentucky, Oklahoma State, UCF. I really don't think that there's a team that drew a harder first-year schedule. I don't have a single gimme on this schedule. I don't even think North Dakota State is a gimme. I think they're an elite FCS program that if Colorado's not ready, things could go bad. But I do think that the talent they've added and the elite quarterback they have just get them to 6 wins. I don't feel as confident as Landon that they could be, one of the top tier teams, but I think that they will be bowl eligible.
Not going to lie, I was not very familiar with their schedule. I looked at it very briefly for like half a second. Holy crap.
Yeah, it's the toughest schedule.
I didn't even realize that run of UCF, Kansas State, Arizona, and then Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma at the end of the season. I take back what I said where the schedule is. They have a decent draw. They had a terrible draw. This was rough. That's a rough schedule for them.
I will say,
I do still think they get the over. Sorry, I have to say that. I do still think they get the over, even though the schedule is a lot worse than I originally thought and saw.
Yeah, I mean, how I look at it, I think their schedule last year was even harder, and they're a better team this year. And I feel like they could be significantly better, and I would straight up just take them over a lot of these teams they're playing. So even if they win half of them, of these like 50-50 games, that would still be 6 wins.
I feel like the first 4 are critical. I think that Dion, there's been a lot of culture allegations thrown around, where, as soon as a Colorado player leaves, they start trashing the program, they start trashing Dion, they start trashing everything. I think Dion needs a good record, probably 3-1 or 4-0 in the first 3 to really hold that team together. And if they're able to pull that off in kind of the softer, the soft opening, I think that they could be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if they take care of business, they should be able to go 3-1 in the first 4. Like, I don't think that's asking anything insane.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think that 4-0 is on the table, but I think 3-1 is most likely. Okay, let's move on to Houston. Houston, again, a new Big 12 newcomer from last year. They went 4-8. So not an elite record, but I think it was okay. It was par for the course, I think, for the new Big 12 editions. But unfortunately, Vegas predicts them to regress. Their win total this year is only 3.5, which seems extremely low. when you think about it. Landon, why are you still on the under?
I'm on the under. 3.5 is low, but they also are losing 2 out of their 3 best receivers, and they're also completely restructuring their defense with a new defensive coordinator, and 13 of their top 17 defenders are gone, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because the defense was pretty poor. But I just think there's going to be a lot of shift in this program, and it's going to be really hard to get back on your feet. And I also don't think they have a very easy schedule either. And so I don't know. I just see them getting 3 wins.
For me, the under, before looking at that Colorado schedule, I thought Houston had the toughest schedule in the conference. That stretch of Iowa State, TCU, Kansas, Utah, Kansas State, Arizona, that is brutal. That is 6 games that I don't expect them to be in at all. And then going to Oklahoma to start your season in week 2, it just does not look very, very good. I do like Donovan Smith quite a lot. I think he's a very fun quarterback, very electric. I just don't like the weapons around him as much as other people do. Yeah, I just, with how tough the schedule can be and the talent they have, I just don't see a world where they get more than 2 to 3 wins, truthfully. As much as I like Houston, they're just not it this year. It's going to be tough for them.
This, for me, is an over. I know that may seem like a hot take because people are projecting Houston to be the worst team in the Big 12, but I just really believe in Willie Fritz. He's won every single place that he's been. He's a program builder. He's someone that I think will not let his teams beat themselves. I think a lot of bad teams, they get down on themselves and they keep making mistakes and, they kind of give the game away quite easily. I don't think that's going to be there with Houston. I don't think Houston is going to come into these games thinking, oh, we're just here to show up. We're just here to get beat 45-10 and then, let's get back on the bus. I think that they're actually going to play for Willie Fritz. I think that he's going to clean up mistakes. And while I don't think they're extremely talented, I think they're going to play fundamentally sound football. And for me, I can see 4 wins. I can see them tripping up, maybe one team taking care of business, UNLV, Rice, and getting one of the Baylor and BYU games. To me, that seems more likely than only winning 3 games. I believe enough in Willie Fritz and the culture he's going to build that I think Houston goes over.
Yeah, I just feel like it might take a year. They barely beat UTSA last year and actually lost to Rice, and they would have had 2 wins if not for a tipped Hail Mary last second and then an overtime win against Baylor. And obviously the win still counts. A win is a win. But I just think it's going to be tough.
They only
to
have to get lucky a couple times. Yeah. It's only 3.5. That's like what I'm saying. The win total is so low. It's only 3.5.
I will say, outside of Utah, Houston's probably my second favorite Big 12 team. And so I do hope that you're right, Tanner. I do think having a good Houston team would be a lot of fun. Or not a good, I guess okay. Better than 3.5 wins. Houston team would be a lot of fun. I would love to see them shake up the Big 12 this year. That would be really cool. Mm-hmm. Getting 5 wins would be awesome.
Yeah, I don't think their recruiting is like absolutely like dead though. Like 2022 they were 55, 2023 they were 56, 2024 they were 60. And like in Houston you should probably doing better than that, but like I don't think this team is totally talent deficient. So like I think a good coach plus a little bit of talent there, to me 4, it's too low. I can't say they're going to only win 3 games.
I will say Houston, to me, again, this is probably a little bit of bias because I do like them. Outside of UCF, I think they have the brightest future of the G5 additions in the Big 12. Houston could be a pretty good recruiting hotbed. Texas, Southeast Texas, there's a lot of really, really good football programs there for high school teams. If Houston can be good and can make a push for some of those maybe middle of the road guys that would consider going to Texas, but hey, they're not going to get any playing time, come start at Houston, that could be really good for them. And I do hope in the next 3-4 years, Houston becomes bowl eligible and really starts to make a push to be a lot better in the Big 12 and be a respectable P5, I guess P4. Sorry, it's going to be hard to adjust. Program.
Okay, let's move on to the next team, which is Iowa State. Last year, they were 7-5, and their win total is at 7.5 this year. Iowa State is one of those programs that I think is really consistent, and I like their quarterback, Rocco Becht. And so, Landon, why are you on the under?
I'm on the under. I think Rocco Becht has a little bit more growing to do before they're ready to compete. Their opponent adjusted offense and defense overall do look pretty good. I'm just not a super big believer in Iowa State, to be honest with you. I just feel like they're a program that, I don't know. I feel like they're going to lose a lot of close games this year.
I really, really like this offense. According to Pick Six previews, probably the best resource in college football. I'll say it 1,000 times. Awesome. They jumped from 61st in the 70 ranking to 16th in offense overall, just from a change in quarterback, which obviously is important, but also getting Nathan Schulhase. I don't know his name as I can't say his last name as the offensive coordinator. I really, really like Rocco Becht. I think he has the potential to be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. I hope that they can continue to be a scoring powerhouse on offense. I like their rushing attack. I like their passing attack. My biggest question is going to be, can they have a better defense? Because it doesn't look great for me when it comes. Actually, no, I'm looking at the wrong things. I apologize. I really like the defense. I'm struggling. Holy crap, that was rough. I think they'll be good. 8 wins. That is all.
I think that Iowa State has all of the pieces there. I think that the coaching is good. I think the pieces in place offensively are good. I think the pieces in place defensively are good. So I don't know why I feel some reservation on picking the over for Iowa State. I would think that maybe they don't separate quite as much as I would like to see from someone in this situation. I do think that they have 2 gimme games with week 1 and week 3, but then I don't see another game that I would be a gimme for on the rest of the schedule. I think it's going to be, hard competition. I do think that it is a little bit, foolish to buy into a QB wholeheartedly after their freshman year because, defensive coordinators are smart. They watch tape, they make adjustments, and the things that were easy as a freshman are not going to be easy as a sophomore because teams are just smart nowadays. But yeah, I think I'm going to go over. I think this is a solid team, and I think that they're, pretty good overall.
Yeah, I will say I kind of felt like under in the last 5 years, they've only gotten 8 wins one time. And I don't know if anything's super different this year. They actually have a lot of years at 7 wins, which is right about where I see them finishing. And they actually did lose to Memphis in their bowl game as well as Ohio last year, which shows that this team might not be exactly as strong as you would like. And then add in that Iowa out of conference game, which I think is a guaranteed loss. I think to me, this is going to be a close one. I could see them getting 8 regular season wins, but at the same time, I'd be a little bit surprised.
Okay, let's move on to the next team in the list, Kansas. Kansas obviously brings back Jalen Daniels, who is an elite quarterback, but with a ton of health concerns. I think that I'll let Landon explain why he took the under on the 8.5
Yeah, I
win
took
total.
the under here because Jalen Daniels has been injured every year he's played. But luckily, they actually had a really good backup quarterback who was able to kind of hold them over and get some wins. He's no longer there. I forgot exactly what his name was. But
Jason Bean.
Yeah, Jason Bean. Super solid player, but without him being there anymore, I mean, history says another Jalen Daniels injury will happen. And when I see that happening, they're actually Kansas is a team where they're losing a lot, and a lot of it is their good players. So that's something that worries me a lot, especially offensively. I just don't know if they can keep up. And Kansas is not the deepest program, let's be honest. They're not historically a great football school. And I think that depth is going to really come back to bite them this year. So I've got the under.
I'm a big believer in Lance Leopold. I really like him. And I do think Jalen Daniels is awesome. I do think they exceed 8 wins with him on the roster. Problem is, the dude will never be on the freaking roster. He's always hurt. I don't see him making it past the TCU game, truthfully. It's just one of those things where it sucks. Because he's just an awesome football player. He's incredible to watch. He can do anything on the field except stay healthy. And that really hinders them. They don't have the depth, like Lennon said, this year. They don't have the backup quarterback. They lose everybody after this year. It could be back to the worst of the worst for Kansas if Jalen Daniels can't come out and have a really good year this year.
I think that Kansas's secondary is elite on defense, but I think, the front seven could potentially be one of the worst in the Big 12. They lost a lot on the front seven. While I do think their secondary is elite, how much does that matter if you can't, stop the run? If you can't, get the ball back from opponents? And so I have serious questions on defense because that's a really weak position group. And I also have serious questions on offense because of the injury risk. And so for me, when predicting the under, I just feel like one or the other of those is probably going to rear its head, and it's going to, show up in a big way that impacts the win total. So I do think this team has top end talent. I do think that if they put it all together, they're definitely a contender for the Big 12 title. But predicting a perfect season like that is risky. And so I'm assuming one of these areas is going to go wrong, which is why I picked the under.
Yeah, they also lost their offensive coordinator, which it remains to be seen how much that will impact it, but I can't see that impacting it positively.
Yeah, I can't say that I think Grimes from Baylor and formerly at BYU is a good coordinator. I actually think he's among the lower tier of Power
Yeah.
5 coordinators as far as the offensive side. So it'll be interesting to see, putting in a new system. They obviously have veterans. They can probably pick it up pretty quick, but I think out of all the teams in the Big 12, this is the boomer bust team. I think that things could go really, really well, or I think that they could go really poorly. So I don't feel confident about the under, but I think that's where I have to lean.
8.5 is a big 9 wins to get over is going to be hard for them. Even if Jalen Daniels stay healthy, if I'm going to be honest, but he won't, unfortunately.
Okay, let's move on to the next team on the list, the Kansas State Wildcats. Kansas State, obviously coming off a really good year, 8-4 in 2023, losing Will Howard for replacing him with new starter Avery Johnson, who was a highly ranked recruit. Win total is 9.5 this year, so to go over, they have to win 10 games, which is aggressive. It's really high, but this is a team with high expectations. Landon, what do you think?
Yeah, this was actually a mistake for me. I actually meant to put over. I must have accidentally forgot to change that to over. But I do believe Kansas State, I have them as the second best team in the Big 12 for me. And I do think they're going to reach 10 wins. I know that's a high total. But if you look at it, they were 9-4 last year, and they had 5 one-score games and lost 4 of them. They also found Avery Johnson midway through the year, who has played tremendous for them. Obviously, as a freshman, we still need to see more to verify that. But I mean, that plus some of the best recruiting in the Big 12, and they don't have to play Utah, I think that they're going to be able to reach that 10-win mark.
I think this is the team to look out for in the Big 12 outside of, again, the Utes. Shocking. I like Avery Johnson a lot. Can he be consistent with the deep ball? That's my biggest question mark with him. Can he be accurate? He's shown he could be, but can he continue? they just have an influx of young talent that's coming in. They got Dylan Edwards from Colorado, who was a stud when I watched him play. He's electric. Get him the ball as much as you can. Avery Johnson, excellent runner. And obviously also Jace Brown. He's another freshman that came out and he looked really good last year. If this team can continue to develop with their youth, they can be really good for quite a while. The biggest question mark is, can the young players continue to emerge and continue to improve? I think so. I do like their schedule. Lana brought it up. They don't play the University of Utah, which is always a big thing when it comes to your win totals this year. I think outside of one other team, this is the team to watch out for college football playoff implications in the Big 12. And that's why I have them over that 9.5 wins. I could see them getting close to 11 to 10 wins this year, truthfully.
I also am on the over. I think that there are a lot of reasons for optimism for Kansas State. I think the schedule sets up extremely well for them. I think it is maybe the easiest schedule in the Big 12. I think that it's among them, certainly. I think that their coaching staff is elite. Chris Kleiman has won everywhere he's been. You know, he created a dynasty at the FCS level. He is someone that the big schools want. He's a program builder. He's someone that I really trust to kind of reload and retool. I'm not quite as high on Avery Johnson as a lot of people are. I do think that there is some cause for concern when, the guy you wanted to run out of town goes to Ohio State and is the starter there. Like, I think that people assuming that Avery Johnson is automatically an upgrade, that's too far for me. I think that could be true, but, it just makes me nervous. I think that people want to run players out of town all the time, and it's not always, greener grass on the other side. Although I do think Avery Johnson has a really bright future.
Yeah.
I think that losing a lot on the offensive line is risky for me, especially with a young play caller. How is that five going to play together? Is Avery Johnson going to be able to get into the right checks? Is he going to be able to identify where the pressure is coming from? I think that is a lot harder to do with a new offensive line rather than, an older, experienced offensive line. And so I think there are a couple reasons for, skepticism, but overall, this is an incredibly strong team. I trust the coaching, and I think the talent level is good. So I'm going over.
Yeah, I think Kansas State is very slept on by the average fan. In their 9 games that they won by an average of 22.5 points per game, which is significant. And in 3 of their losses, they lost to Missouri with a 61-yard field goal. Missouri's a dang good team. They lost to Texas in overtime where they weren't able to score with 3 plays inside the 5-yard line. And then they lost to Iowa State in an unbelievable snow game. I feel like those are 3 things that you could probably not count on to happen again this year. And I don't know. I think their team's really strong going into 2024.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that this sets up for potentially a really special season for Kansas State. Okay, let's move on to the Oklahoma State Cowboys next.
Probably our most polarizing opinions this year.
The win total at FanDuel right now is 8.5. In 2023, they went 9-3. Landon, what do you see from Oklahoma State this year?
This is an interesting one, and I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Oklahoma State because the win total was actually at 7.5 for the last few months, and I think just recently, in the past week or two, it jumped up to 8.5. And there was a lot of people seeing that and saying, how is that possible? The win total is at 7.5. Oklahoma State won 10 games last year. You need to add a little bit of context to that, though. First off, they won a bowl game, so they were 9-3 in the regular season. And when you look, they had one convincing win the entire year that was by more than 10 points, and that was Cincinnati. Every game other than that was a nail biter. Those could have 100% gone the other direction. I have them at the under this year because I don't think that they'll be able to convert late in the game like they were last year. I think that was a little bit of an outlier. I think that losing to South Alabama at home, that's a major blemish that can't be overlooked. And then losing 49-3 against UCF, those are really bad losses. And I don't think if we compare them to a team like Kansas State that has a 9.5 win total, Kansas State did not have any games like that the entire year. I just see a difference here with Oklahoma State. I think that Bowman is a pretty bad quarterback, especially for what their offense is trying to do. And anytime Oklahoma State played an above average rushing defense, Ollie Gordon just completely disappeared. Their offensive line isn't good enough to get that push that's necessary when they're playing against better defensive linemen. So I think they'll regress to the mean a little bit. I don't think they really got better this offseason. And I think that some of their flaws will be exposed. So I've got them at under 8.5.
I think you're a little bit too nice to them, Landon. I think these are the biggest frauds in college football. Getting 10 wins last year is absolutely incredible. How they did that, I have no idea. You don't lose a game to South Alabama at home 7-33 and not be a bad team. I'm sorry. They aren't good. If your biggest draw is have Ollie Gordon to be your number one guy, they play at any defense that is actually good. He sucked. They have a 3.9 offensive rush push. That's what you need when you're running the ball. They aren't good. They got lucky. They played some pretty mediocre teams, and they played the better teams in the pack in that Big 12 last year at the very beginning. You lose to UCF 3-45. You lose to South Alabama 7-33. I'm sorry. You can't be a college football contender, playoff contender, and have those losses and have those players returning to your team. The returning production, 80%, 90%. Great. Not good. And I haven't even talked about probably one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. 442 yards per game. I'm sorry. That is so freaking bad.
Yeah, I also think this is a pretty comfortable under for me. I'm not quite at the level of Ethan as far as this, but I do think that there's a bad mix here. I think that, the offensive line, which is supposedly a strength, was quietly just okay last year. The rushing offense was only 68th in the country. And that was with the person who many to believe to be the best running back in the country in Ollie Gordon. I think that Bowman is bad, and I think the defense returning 80% of a terrible defense is a really bad sign. I would feel much better about their defense if they had kind of turned over the roster, because I don't think that they really have a lot of talent on that side of the ball, and I think it's one of the weakest, offense or defense position groups in the Big 12. So for me, the combo of, a bad quarterback and a bad defense, it just makes it really tough to win games. I think that, like Ethan, I think that things broke right for them. They were really fortunate last year. I view this as an average team. I think that if I had to predict an exact record, I would go 6-6. I think they're going to be bowl eligible. But yeah, I think they're a little bit of a paper tiger this year. It could come back to bite. They do have experience. That is where I would say that, their strength is the experience of the team. They have a lot of seniors, super seniors, and people that have played in a ton of games. I just don't think the talent level is that high. And so that's why I'm going under.
Agreed. I mean, as we talked about, their defense is extremely dark. It's very bad. They almost lost to Arizona State, which I referenced in the Arizona State prediction. Like, I know we're talking from a Utah perspective. Utah beat Arizona State 55-3. And that was that was probably the worst team. I mean, not probably. It was the worst team that Utah's had for the past 4 years.
We could have beaten them 80-3.
Yes, and we could have, honestly. And so that just shakes how I view Oklahoma State a lot. I think they're a program that plays to their competition a lot. And I think that's going to come back to bite them massively. It seems like they got up for the big games like beating Oklahoma. But then you go watch the film and it feels like Oklahoma shot themselves in the foot. That was the worst game Oklahoma played all season. I just don't see Oklahoma State being able to emulate that this year. I just think there's going to be a lot more games that don't end up falling their way late.
They do have the benefit of probably playing the three of the worst teams in the Big 12. In the BYU, Baylor, ASU. I think Baylor's okay. Like we talked about them, they're weird. But those three teams aren't good. And so that could definitely, they can get those three. I think they get those 3 wins. But outside of that, and maybe the South Dakota State game, they're a good team as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be confident in that one. I think Oklahoma State is favored, but South Dakota State has won a ton of FCS national championships. That's a team that knows how to win. I wouldn't be overlooking that one if I was Oklahoma State. I think there's a game there.
There's 3 games on the schedule. I'm like, they win 70% of those games. Those are 70% of chance they win that game. Outside of that, I'm not seeing anything that's like, oh, they got to win there. That's a good win. They have a good chance of winning this one. I don't see that. Being 8.5, I think that's way too high. I think 7.5 was way too high. I don't think Alan Bowman is a good quarterback, and that's the most important position in football.
I think at Arkansas is going to be a hard game as well. I mean, that's obviously they're not the cream of the crop SEC program, but like I think Arkansas has them overmatched physically and talent-wise, and it's at home. Like, I don't know. I think that's very losable.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that there are reasons for optimism. If you're looking for reasons for optimism from Oklahoma State, it's Bowman improves in his 7th year, which sounds crazy when you say it, but it's possible if he gets all the first team reps. The new defensive coordinator they hired last year, finally is able to implement his offense. They clean things up and they're able to, make some more gains than they were. I think that there is a path there. I just think the other path is much more likely. There's always someone that goes way under, and this is my pick for that.
Agreed.
Well, I will say Mike Gundy is an excellent coach. So he's one of those coaches that if anybody could do it, he could will this team to more wins just being that good of a head coach. It's just one of those seasons. I just don't see it happening. If the defense doesn't improve at all, or it does improve slightly, they're in for a long, hard season. It's a really, really bad defense.
Yeah, like when I look at this team statistically, if it wasn't a Mike Gundy team and wasn't Oklahoma State, you look at these stats and you think like, oh, they must have won probably like 4 to 6 games, but they won 10 last season. Which, I mean, that's a testament to Mike Gundy, but I just don't know if that's going to be able to be repeated this year.
Look at their blind resume compared to Texas Tech. Texas Tech went 6-6, and I think that they would win a blind resume comparison with Oklahoma State, personally. Yeah. If you just look at their stats on Pick 6 previews, 63rd scoring defense for Texas Tech, 64th scoring offense for Texas Tech. Oklahoma State was the 91st scoring defense and the 54th scoring offense.
Yeah.
I think that a blind resume comparison, people are, I get it's Oklahoma State, but if you just dig a little bit beneath the surface, I think there's a lot of concern there for me.
It's 442 yards per game. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yards per, that's one of the best games of the season for any offense in the country. They gave that up on average. It's gonna be a long road for them, I think.
Okay, let's move on to TCU. TCU obviously went to the national title game and got stomped by Georgia 2 years ago. But still an elite season for them. Their win total this year, last year they went 5-7. Pretty big letdown, I think, from the national title game. Obviously, win total this year is 7.5. Landon, why did you take the over?
I took the over because TCU is one of the top programs in the Big 12 in terms of talent acquisition, and I feel like their luck just completely flipped In 2022, they had a lot of close wins. They went 0-4 in one-score games in 2023. I think a team with a lot of talent, good coaching with Sonny Dykes. I think he's a great coach. I think that there's a lot of potential for them to improve, and I just think 7.5 is low enough, as well as having a reasonably manageable schedule. I mean, Stanford, where is LIU even from? I've never seen that team before now. Like, I think that they're going to improve this year to 8 wins, or even more potentially.
I think for me, TCU, their biggest issue last year was turning the ball over. They had so many interceptions. And if Josh Hoover, the projected starter, I believe he's all but confirmed to be the starter for TCU this year. If he can cut it down a little bit, I mean, in the 6 games he threw 9 interceptions. That's not the best, but I think getting all first team reps and really working on that in the offseason could really help him. I do really like him. He looked really good in those 6 games he played. I think offensively, TCU could be really, really good. I do think they can throw the ball with the best of them. The running offense, it's good enough to help the offense. My only concern probably is defense. Again, over 400 yards per game. It doesn't look good. Does that improve? Hopefully. I have them over. Again, like Landon said, their schedule, they have a few of the really good Big 12 teams on their schedule, with Arizona, with Utah, with UCF. Outside of those games, I'm confident in a lot of those wins. So that's why I have them over. I think they get to 8 wins this year.
Again, for me, I would say do a blind resume comparison with TCU and Oklahoma State.
Yeah, that's very weird.
If TCU doesn't go 0-4 in one-score games, they could be 9-3 and in the same, in the Big 12 championship like OSU was. I think TCU has the, either first or second most talented roster as far as recruiting rankings in the Big 12. I think that there's a lot of talent there. The coaching is pretty good. And if they just get better turnover luck, I think that they improve a lot. I think this is one of the teams that's being slept on the most. And I think Vegas knows that, because after a 5-7 season, putting them into 7.5 win total, I think shows the respect that Vegas has for the talent. I don't think the schedule is that bad. I think that they have a couple of tough road games, but they get a lot of good teams at home too. Like Oklahoma State and Arizona and UCF, getting those 3 at home, I think is critical. And those are the games for me that will decide whether they go over or under this win total. But I've got it over.
Yeah, and I think TCU also took steps that will lead to improvement. They fired their defensive coordinator and brought in Andy Avalos. He's going away from that 3-3-5 that they played, because the whole point of that is you're supposed to have protection against explosive plays, but they had no protection against that. They were really poorly ranked. So they're bringing in someone that formerly actually was at Oregon, and he's going to be running a 4-man front, hopefully can get more consistent pressure. Their safety room and their long pass, I mean, you can see their explosive pass was bad. Their defensive backers weren't great. They brought in 8 defensive backs. And little tidbit for Utah fans, the headliner of that is actually to Travis Broughton, who is a Utah 4-year player and 2-year starter. So some Utah fans have strong opinions about him. I think he's a decent pickup. So I think
trash.
I think TCU will be improved for sure.
Bro got targeted all year long.
To be fair to him, he's not going to be playing Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix. He will be playing Noah Fifita, but he won't be playing the
Cam
first
Rising.
Yeah, that's true. He will be playing Cam Rising.
I do think he'll have a better year this year, truthfully. I think Brian is a good player. He just got outmatched.
He plays an aggressive
which most
style.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
He had a lot of interceptions. I don't think he's bad.
He also played maybe the hardest QB lineup potentially of all time last year. Like it was one of the hardest, and he was okay. I think he'll be pretty good for TCU. Okay, let's move on to Texas Tech. Texas Tech last year had a disappointing season, I would say. People were picking them as, the dark horse for the Big 12, someone that people could see even, winning the Big 12 or just making the title game or having a good year. And then they went 6-6. I think Texas Tech fans are a little disappointed in that. The win total this year is 7.5. Vegas does expect a better year this year, I would say. What do you think, Landon?
I think a better year is a little bit of a stretch. They have basically a complete overhaul at a few really critical decisions like defensive line, secondary, offensive line, and receiver. That's a lot in 1 year to try and overhaul. I just think that is going to keep them from reaching that 8-win mark. 8 wins for the over is a lot. That's a high over. And so I just don't see them reaching that this year.
For me, this is probably my biggest petty pick. I had Texas Tech as my dark horse last year in the Big 12. They were terrible. They played Oregon pretty dang good though. So I mean, props to them last year. I will say their schedule's not very favorable either. Getting Arizona, TCU, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State all away is pretty tough. Washington State's not a team to treat lightly. I just don't see a world where they get more than 7 wins at all. So under is my pick here. A lot more pettiness than probably necessary when it comes to this pick, but that's where I'm at with Texas Tech.
Texas Tech, I really feel, like they were cursed. They got Patrick Mahomes. And since 2016, it's been almost unprecedented injury luck at that one specific position, the quarterback. They have yet to have a quarterback start and finish a regular season injury-free since 2016. That's terrible luck. That really is.
I do have the best quarterback of all time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so
they used up all their luck on Patrick Mahomes. Morton is back. I think that he is extremely talented, but he's also, injury prone. True freshman last year, Jake Strong played and he threw 6 interceptions in the 6 quarters that he played, which, is not exactly what you want from your quarterback. If this was at 6.5, I would feel very tempted to take the over because I do think that they have quite a few winnable games on here. But winning 8 games, going 8-4, especially when they have Arizona away, Iowa State away, Oklahoma State away, TCU away, who I all think are better than them.
Mm-hmm.
When I have 4 losses that I think are pretty sure, it's tough for me to say that those are the only 4. They're going to slip up somewhere else. So that's why I'm on the under.
I like if it's at 6.5, this is a lot more of an interesting topic.
Okay, let's move on to UCF. UCF was the most successful G5 to P5 transition last year. They went 6-6 in the regular season. Their win total is 7.5. Landon, what do you like about UCF?
I am extremely high on UCF, and it starts with that overall offense. If you look at that lower box, the opponent adjusted, they had the 10th overall offense, 4th rushing, and 20th passing. And that 20th realistically can get a lot better with the huge addition of KJ Jefferson, which is what everyone's talking about with UCF. Their out of conference looks very reasonable. I think those are 2 easy wins. Beating a team like Oklahoma State was actually 42-3, not 49-3, but similar. They have a great offense. Their defense is serviceable, and they improved at every position. They made good use of the portal, recruited well. I just see UCF on the rise 100% this year.
Gus Malzahn with an SEC quarterback that's dual threat. I mean, Cam Newton, anyone? KJ Jefferson, I don't think he's as good as Cam Newton. I don't think there's many quarterbacks in college football that will ever be as good as Cam Newton. But that's just a good, what's the word I'm looking for? A good mesh. A dual threat quarterback that can do things that KJ Jefferson can do with a head coach that can get the best out of that type of player. It's hard to see a team not succeed. And then also, I do think they have a pretty favorable schedule. Like outside of 3 games, like going to Florida at the Swamp, even though Florida might not be the best, it's gonna be hard. My losses could probably come from TCU, Florida, Arizona, and Utah, and that gets them to 8 wins. Outside of that, I can see them winning any one of those games pretty comfortably and be really good. So I have the over.
This one for me is one of my strongest overs. I was really, really impressed by how they transitioned from G5 to P5 last year. I think Gus Malzahn is an elite tier head coach, as we saw with his national title with Auburn. I think he is a fantastic recruiter. I think UCF is in a prime location for recruits. And honestly, I think that they have a lot more talent than people think. Easily the most talent out of the four like G5 additions to the Big 12. As far as their recruiting class, their 5-year rank is 56th. Their transfer rank, they were 32, 22, 26 the last 3 years. I think KJ Jefferson is a great quarterback, and I think he fits hand in glove into what Gus Malzahn wants to run here. And so I think that there's a lot to be happy about. The scoring defense was 62nd, 25.8 points per game. I think that that's actually one of the better marks in the Big 12 as far as defense. They've also supplemented in the portal. I think there's a lot of talent here. And I think that they blew a lot of leads last year that I don't think they're going to blow again this year. I think that they're going to be ready for playing the full game, playing the full 60 minutes. So for me, this is someone that I could see in the Big 12 title game. I'm really that high on UCF.
Yeah, like UCF upgraded big time at quarterback. They kept their 2 leading receivers, and they had 7 Power 5 players transfer, mostly linebackers, which was their weakest position, and 3 linebackers leave. To me, they've just completely upgraded.
Yeah, 6-6 last year, and I think they were much better than that overall. I think that, their blown leads really discouraged them. I think that they are a team that really nobody wants to face this year. And yeah, while I do think that, at Florida is a tough non-con game, I don't know. Like, I don't see any guaranteed losses on the schedule. Like, I don't see a single game that I'm like, I don't think they have any shot at winning that.
I agree with you.
And so I feel like most teams, there's one that I'm like, yeah, that one seems pretty unlikely. UCF, I don't really see that. I think that they have a good shot in everything.
I mean,
Okay.
one more thing before we go, just to mention more on the blown leads. 5 blown leads lost in the fourth quarter, 4 of them double digits. I just don't think something like that's going to repeat.
Yeah, I agree. I think, regression or progression to the mean in this case, if they just win half of those, we're looking at an 8-4 team in your first year in the Power 5. And I think people are talking about them very differently.
They're sleeping giants.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about next team on the list, the Utah Utes.
Is this a team we have to talk about?
Yeah, I don't think we know very much about this team, right? New to the Big 12 this year. Extremely injury-riddled season last year. 8-4 in the regular season. Win total this year is 9.5. Obviously, the headliner last year was no Cam Rising, no Brant Keithy. One of the most injury-cursed seasons of all time, according to Pick 6 Preview, the most he's ever seen. Landon, why do you have the over on this one?
I have the over on this one just because I think they have a very manageable schedule, one of the easier in the Big 12, paired with the most experienced team in the Big 12 and one of the most experienced teams in the entire country. If you look at Utah's defensive ratings, everything looks pretty good across the entire board, and that was playing with a completely anemic offense that was usually just giving the ball back with very little time for the defense to rest, while playing some of the best offensive teams in the entire country. The cause for concern for some people would be looking to the right at those offensive stats. The good thing about that, though, is we have completely changed the offense at Utah from last year. It will look 100% completely different than what was happening last year. I think Utah has the best offense in the Big 12 as well as the best defense. And I think that paired with experience, one of the longest tenured head coaches in the entire country, only behind, I think, Iowa's coach, I believe. I think that's a recipe for success. So I have Utah getting at least 10 wins, potentially even more.
I mean, if you want to learn more about University of Utah's offense, go look at 2022. 2023's production does not give you the picture of what you're going to see in 2024. Cam Rising, he is a back-to-back Power 4 conference champion. No matter what, if you don't think the Big Pac-12 was very good, he still did it. He is a dog. He's a winner. He's awesome. He's great. I'm excited for people that have not watched him play, get a chance to watch him play, because it is quite fun. I have the over because I think this is probably one of the easiest schedules Utah has had to have since being in a Power 4 conference. Getting a lot of these bad teams away really help them. My biggest question marks is probably going to be at Oklahoma State. I know I talked down on them, but they're still going to be a really good team at home. And then at UCF. Getting them on a short week at the end of the season where Utah could be locked into a conference championship spot. That's going to be a pretty good trap game. The defense is special. Outside of losing Sione Vaki and Cole Bishop to the draft, the safety room is probably my only concern on the defensive side. And if there's anybody that can convince me otherwise, it is Morgan Scalley, the defense coordinator. Probably one of the best safeties in Utah history. Now a defensive coordinator for quite a while. So, I mean, Utah looks really good. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them at 11 to 12 wins, truthfully.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Looking at strength of schedule metrics, this is the easiest schedule that Utah has had since they joined the Power 5 in 2010. And it's also easier than some years that they had in the Mountain West as well when they were competing with TCU and BYU.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So there also were some Mountain West schedules that were actually harder statistically than this one. I think this is, probably the softest landing into the Big 12 they possibly could have gotten as far as schedule. Their returning production on offense and defense, I think, shows a good ratio. 63% returning production on offense. Probably not a lot of production you want to return there. I don't think any Utah fan wants to return to the days of Bryson Barnes at quarterback. They want to turn the leaf, go back to Cam Rising, who's a proven winner, proven elite quarterback. The defense was elite last year, and you got to factor in the fact that they played Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Noah Fafita, along with a slew of other, elite to great quarterbacks. The schedule that year simply just does not have those players. There's no one of that talent level that Utah's going to be facing this year. This could be a top 10 unit nationally as far as the defense. The only real concern is replacing the safety room, but there are some proven veterans coming in. Aliki Gilman from Stanford, who was an honorable mention as far as all Pac-12 teams, and Nate Ritchie, who has played quite a bit for Utah over the past few years. There's not a ton of holes on this team. Similar to Kansas, I would say that injuries are the concern. The injury bug hit extremely hard last year, and they still managed 8 wins in a Pac-12 that was, probably the second best conference in the country last year. So for me, this is a pretty easy over on the 9.5. I think that Utah's elite at home, 30-2 in their last 32 games at home. I don't
losses come from Oregon
and
USC. Was
USC.
insane.
Yeah, and I don't anticipate them losing at home this year. And I think on the road, I really don't see more than 2 losses because they get some easy games on the road as well, as far as, Houston, and Utah State. So I think they're going to take care of business at home, and I don't really see them losing more than 2 on the road. So I'll go easy over for me here.
Yeah, something interesting I want to bring up is I think that most people would agree, even if we could just guarantee that we were back at the level of the 2022 offense, people would take that immediately. I think there's I would even say it's more likely that this team's even better than the 2022 offense, which is insane to think. But adding people like Dorian Singer, Cam Rising just getting even better, Keithy coming back healthy the whole year, this team could make some serious noise in the Big 12. And that defense it's wildly elite, I would even say. There's just so many dogs on that side of the ball. I think it's going to be a real challenge for a lot of Big 12 teams.
Yeah, that's something that we just don't talk about a lot when it comes to the transfers that came in. I mean, even adding a guy like Carson Ryan, a tight end that started for Power 5 UCLA last year. There's a lot of people in Utah that you can be excited for. I do think this is going to be the best wide receiver room Utah's ever had, with Alford, Singer, Parks, and then you got the tight end room of so many awesome players.
Yeah, I think that the first half of the schedule is harder than the second half. Oklahoma State and then Arizona State the next week is the hardest 2-game stretch, and I think there's a really, I would say, clear path after that. I think that there are teams that will be good, I believe, in TCU, Colorado, Iowa State, and UCF, but none that project as an elite talent team, someone that's a guaranteed loss. So I think the schedule sets up really nicely.
If Utah comes out 2-0 against Oklahoma State and Arizona, that's truthfully like an undefeated watch. Every single one of those games after, we will be favored to win. And I'm excited to see that. If we come out 2-0 against Oklahoma State and Arizona, that's the big question mark on that end. Do I think it's likely? Not at all. Utah always fumbles a game they're not supposed to, which is unfortunate. And I'm just excited to watch these guys play again, truthfully. Watching Cam Rising play is going to be great.
Yeah, this will be the first season that I can remember where I believe Utah will be favored in every game they play in the regular season.
Yep,
I think that is true.
I think that's true. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the final team, West Virginia. In 2023, they were 8-4, so it may seem surprising to see their win total at only 6.5 this year. But I think that the schedule is just tough. Landon, talk about West Virginia a little bit.
Yeah, I think they overperformed a bit. I was watching some of their film, and they're a very, very one-dimensional team. You can see that they have the 4th rushing offense in the entire country, which is pretty insane. I just think something like that, like their O-line run push wasn't necessarily great. 21 is not bad at all. It's just how much they're running. And then their defense, I think these stats say they're a little bit better than what I saw with the eye test. They look very susceptible to passing and especially deep passes. I don't know. I'm just not feeling them getting 7 wins this year.
They're so interesting to me. I mean, their high-speed option attack is really, really fun to watch. I really like it. I love watching triple options, speed options, quarterback keepers, all those things. I think Green, he definitely lit a fire under that offensive line last year. Really was able to really help them improve, and it's a really stout group. But this schedule is quite rough. I mean, those first 5 games, realistically, they could be 1-4, and that's just hard. I mean, first 8 games, they could be 1-7. I mean, Penn State, Pitt, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, every single one of those games are toss-ups, and I think they won't be favored in any of them, especially with Kansas being in the beginning of the season, with Jalen Daniels hopefully being healthy. It's a very interesting team, a team that I just do not see getting 7 wins. I don't see them getting 5 this year. I think it's a pretty down year for them this year.
I do think they overperformed their win total a little bit last year. I do think they're a good team. I think the defense was okay. which is really all you need in the Big 12. And I think the offense was good because they could run. But yeah, it's just the schedule is so difficult. It's one of the most difficult in the Big 12. And I think that, maybe Garrett Green gets like exposed slightly. I do think he was good, but it was mostly kind of like a dunks and threes offense, short routes and then throwing deep every once in a while. But the focus was on the run. And so, our coordinator is going to watch that tape and think of ways to, maybe stack the box or maybe disguise some coverages and get Garrett Green to throw a few interceptions. I think so. And so for me, while I do like the team, I have to go slightly under. I think they're going to be bowl eligible. I think they're going to get to 6 because I think the talent level is there. But I just don't see them winning 7.
Yeah, they also lost quite a bit on defense that they weren't able to replace. They lost 3 people to the pros and 6 transferring out, and they filled those spots mainly with depth or FCS players. They also have one, like we've already mentioned it, they have a bad schedule. So I think it just could be a little bit slight regression this year, but I still think they make a bowl.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm sure that a lot of you are going to be very mad about, us picking your team under or picking your rival over. I'm sure you got a lot to say about it. Please comment down below. We love seeing comments. If you have any ideas for videos you'd like to see, we're also open to that. Thank you guys for listening, and let's go Utes.